ANC has nominated former Defence and Military Veterans Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula as a candidate for the position of National Assembly Speaker. Now, if elected, Mapisa-Nqakula would effectively be swapping positions with Thandi Modise, who's been appointed Defence Minister in the cabinet reshuffle announced last week. Let's speak about this with political analyst Judith February, who's joining us, I believe, as always, from Cape Town. Judith, great to have you on Newsfeed PM. So is Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula the right fit for the job?
Good afternoon, Thembekile. I would say absolutely not. It seems as if the ANC has an incredible way to go in terms of bringing us to new lows. And certainly the proposition of Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula as a speaker, it really, for those of us who've been watching Parliament for a long time and who've also lamented the state of Parliament for a very long time, this is very disappointing news. We had the former Speaker, Thandi Modise, who's now in President Ramaphosa's cabinet, who brought some stability and dignity back to Parliament, but was also a fair and a stabilizing voice within the chamber. And so really for the ANC to suggest somebody who has a cloud, several clouds of unethical conduct hanging over her head is deeply, deeply disappointing.
And when you read the situation, Judith, the President did say in the cabinet reshuffle announcement that Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula would be redeployed in another position. She was the only one from the three security cluster ministers who were largely blamed for the chaos in July, who was sacked altogether. Does this come across as a political, a way politically to appease some in the ANC by the President?
Well, certainly, Thembekile, that's the only conclusion one can draw, because despite the fact that the ANC has a dearth of talent within its ranks, so what we see is a constant recycling of the same names, to put forward somebody for the Speaker of our Parliament who is so compromised is really quite unacceptable. And one can only read politics into it, this constant balancing act that the ANC does between the different factions of the ANC. Crudely put, one could also see this as Luthuli House versus the Union Buildings. What the President did last week when he reshuffled his cabinet was that he brought those within the party who he could trust, the loyalists, he brought those closer. Mapisa-Nqakula was turfed out. There should have been many others turfed out, but nevertheless. And what this can be seen as is then the ANC always looking after its own, and that merit and ethics actually don't count when it comes to the people's house.
Would I be right to say, Judith, that the biggest test for Mapisa-Nqakula in this role is going to be whether she can remain fair? As you mentioned, Thandi Modise was seen as a stabilizing voice in that role, especially after Baleka Mbete, who'd often been criticized for ruling along an ANC line.
Well, it's about whether she can remain fair, because remember, the Speaker, one of the main functions of the Speaker is to be impartial, but also to ensure the integrity of Parliament. The Speaker is the custodian of that parliamentary integrity. So on the one hand, you have to manage what happens in the plenary, and that's the part that you and I see, and that's often, there's a lot of shouting, there's a lot of hurling of insults and so on. Difficult to maintain order. We saw that with Baleka Mbete. Thandi Modise had a calmer manner, was trying her very best to be fair and to be impartial. But Parliament, the engine room of Parliament is in its committees, and there are many political compromises that need to be made with regard to legislation. And I think of two things here, and the Speaker will be key. On issues of expropriation without compensation, the amendment to the Constitution on issues on land, and secondly, the removal of the public protector. Now, if it is so that this new proposed Speaker, Mapisa-Nqakula, was not trusted by the President, has clouds of corruption over her own head, incidentally, at Thembekile, one of those clouds are around chartered flights between 2017 and 2019. There is a dossier sitting with the Joint Committee on Defence within Parliament. Where do you think that's going to go if the subject of that inquiry is now the Speaker? The other issue is, the second part is the removal of the public protector. What role will the new speaker play? And Thandi Modise played a critical role in ensuring the process thus far. What role will a disloyal former cabinet minister play as speaker? Those, to me, are three very important considerations here.
I think it's safe to say that the challenges for Parliament, especially as far as its oversight role and the work of the Speaker, have become more complex over the years. How would you say that position has evolved with its duties, especially when you compare it to when someone like Fini Janwala, for example, was there, and then you had the entry of new opposition parties in the form of the EFF, who no doubt shook things up?
Well, Thembekile, it's part of a much larger discussion about the efficacy of our Parliament. And in 2009, I was part of an independent panel on the assessment of Parliament led by Pregs Govender. And there were various considerations that we took into account and recommendations made on strengthening Parliament. Chief amongst them was the Public Accounts Committee, which, of course, after the Armsdale investigation was completely emasculated. But also the evolution of Parliament can be seen through the evolution of the ANC, in a sense, as the majority party, which has lost the sort of sense of idealism and the sense of skill of that first Parliament in the kind of glorious halcyon first 5 years. And then during the Mbeki years, a sort of greater executive mindedness started creeping in. And the high point of that was, in fact, the Armsdale. Fini Janwala led Parliament well, but I would argue that the point at which she was truly tested with regards to the independent investigation into the Armsdale, she failed that test. And then subsequently, as you say, we've had Baleka Mbete, whom one can only describe as a disastrous Speaker of the House. She had neither the temperament nor the skill, but ironically, it was her who appointed our independent panel to look into Parliament. And she said, tell me what I need to know to make this institution better. But of course, our report has sat there now for 11 years and it's gathered dust, like most of these reports do. And so it will be very difficult to try now to strengthen Parliament. I think that there needs to be, it is a direct reflection on the weakness and the lack of internal democracy within political parties. But also you have, as you say, new entrants in the EFF. You also have the DA, which has gone through its own peaks and troughs. You have Patricia de Lille from the Good Party, who's subsumed into cabinet. So there have been many changes, but I think the changes in personnel, particularly on all fronts, is leading to a rather more mediocre analysis of legislation and input and so on. I mean, I think of the days of 2000, for example, where you would go to a Justice Committee meeting chaired by the formidable Johnny de Lange, and you had Dean Smuts on the other side of the House, on the other side of the committee room. And these were powerful MPs who were able to hold the executive to account, but also who truly understood what it meant to be lawmakers. And I'm afraid that there's very little of that in Parliament. And so if you have a weak speaker and somebody who is partisan and somebody who has a cloud of unethical conduct hanging over her own head, that will only hasten the decline of Parliament.
Judith February, political analyst, speaking to us from Cape Town. For now, thank you, Judith. Always good to speak to you.